More Mondays family. You are here with Jane and Angie for another edition of our Spring Shorts. And this season on No More Mondays, during our rundown of Rapid Fire, we added a new question, asking our guests for recommendations of other podcasts they listen to. I mean, who needs another podcast other than No More Mondays? But we thought it would be super fun to get some recommendations for all of you podcast enthusiasts out there to add to your lineup. And we got a really cool cross-section of recommendations kind of from a lot of different genres. So as I mentioned, Jane's here with me, and she's going to kind of give us the rundown, and we're going to kind of talk about the insights that we have and maybe even offer up a few of our own suggestions. So Jane, what have we got?
Okay, this is so fun. What is not unusual because of all of our great guests is we have a wide variety of fiction, nonfiction, business, comedy. We've got a little bit of everything. It's a nice cornucopia. So the first one is from Acacia. You need a budget.
And Acacia's very kind of like financially minded. And if you know her, like her crisp personality, she's very organized. And this is a podcast I actually like. And I believe in my conversation with her, I dropped my own recommendation of Planet Money, which is another good, like financially driven podcast. So admittedly of the rundown, that was the one I'm most familiar with. So we've got like financial health covered, but we run the gambit.
Yes.
We run the gambit. So what else is in there, Jane?
Moving into the world of social commentary and politics and current events is Pod Save America from Amber Jackson.
Yeah. And if you're looking to just kind of keep in tune with what's happening in the world, that is one suggestion that is always great.
The next one that I actually listen to, one of my favorites, is The Hidden Brain.
And you mentioned this is kind of like the psychology of like why we do what we do. So talk to us a little bit more about this podcast.
One of my favorites, and it's really a deep dive into psychological exploration of different scenarios. And Shankar Vedantam is the host, and he has this amazing way of telling a story and getting you connected to the science behind why we do the things that we do and social phenomenon. And it's this interesting blend of both. And I find this really interesting and impactful. And whether you're driving or exercising or cleaning your house, there's always a good takeaway on this one. One of my favorites.
That's awesome. And there's a couple other podcasts on here that kind of have cross genres. So that's got the kind of, social science, psychology, but a little bit of kind of, do we say self-help or personal development in it? Which to me kind of leads us into Good For You, which is like a self-help and humor podcast.
Yes. So this was a great suggestion from Sam Alexander, and I haven't actually listened to this one yet, but the way she described and why it was one of her favorites is because of enter it from a comedy perspective, but there's also bigger issues and topics of import that come out of this podcast.
I always love it's Whitney Cummings. I can't remember if we've said that in the last minute or two, but you got to love when you can laugh and get kind of some news and insight at the same time. So it supports that idea that we don't have to take ourselves seriously, even though we can be serious at the same time.
Exactly. And I think that's probably part of where the genesis of the name of the podcast came from. Good For You, sort of tongue in cheek, but also serious at the same time.
Exactly. What's next on this list of awesome podcast recommendations from guests?
Jules Porter had a great one that's connected to her military background. And I think she mentions it's called The Second Lieutenant, but we think it's actually called The Third Lieutenant. And it's stories of how education and has helped people in the military change their lives. And that's obviously near and dear to her heart as well.
Well, and also just, inspiring stories of people overcoming and leveraging resources and really just taking the bull by the horns when it comes to their future. And plus the fact that it's got, our heroes and military in it is amazing. And I would expect nothing less than a really thought-provoking but inspiring podcast recommendation from Jules. It's perfect from her.
So the next one, I think, goes back to what your comment about sort of the self-help or professional development, The Ultimate Shift.
Yeah, and I think this actually ties into that like overcomer, making transitions and rising above circumstance kind of situation. But this was our recommendation from Angela Santi, and anything she recommends, I'm all over. And the host is Ephraim Glick, and he really talks to people who have chosen to overcome circumstances, whether it's, burnout from a career or making a big transition, or, we talk about it, another short leap, taking the entrepreneurial leap after being employed. But, people who've kind of like made bigger moves despite reasoning that they could have very well just decided not to. And I'm a big fan of those kind of stories that it's a little bit like what we do here with No More Mondays, is like, what are people out there doing that can inspire somebody else to move beyond just the status quo?
Helen Day had a fun one that I hadn't heard of. So this was a great suggestion from her. It's called Now You're Asking.
And it's kind of a stream of consciousness between two comedians, right?
Yeah.
Which, when you take into account the fact that Helen's from the UK, I'm just imagining the amount of dry British humor in that conversation. It makes me want to go listen to it right away.
If you look at their episode list, which I did before we came on here today, we're talking about some very interesting subjects, but they're approaching it from their unique comedic perspective, which is really interesting.
I'm curious of you, Jane. What do you want to add to this list?
One of my other favorites is called No Stupid Questions. And this is from Angela Duckworth and Stephen Dubner from Freakonomics Radio. And they just have such a great chemistry together. And each episode they address is not a stupid question. So it could be anything from, one I just listened to was, are you a saver or a gobbler?
Love it.
Yeah. And then another one is self-improvement too selfish? Another one prior to that was, is emotional intelligence really so important? So they have the social science and psychological approach to this. And sometimes they agree and sometimes they don't. And it's just a really interesting deep dive into these things, again, about why people do what they do and from a societal perspective as well.
Well, for those of you, if Angela Duckworth sounds familiar, I'll give you a reading list ad, but she wrote a book called Grit, which is also fantastic. So she's got a great perspective. And I think it's really cool that they craft conversations around this idea that there are no stupid questions, but these are questions that we really wouldn't necessarily stop and ask ourselves, unless given that, that thought-provoking reason to say, is emotional intelligence really, I have an opinion on that, but I'm not going to give it because I want to listen to the podcast first to hear if I'm right. No, I'm kidding.
Well, and they're not, that's what's so fun. They're not always, trying to be super controversial. It's just like things, if you think about all of the things and social norms and mores that we operate under, whether it's in a professional or personal context, it's just, they talk about those things. Why do we do that? Angela brings in her scientist background and lots of data points, but it's really interesting how they both approach it from different ends.
And there's something that's fun about the fact that it's like that authentic approaching that whether they agree or disagree, you're just going to get their perspectives, which is super cool.
Yeah. And I always leave that podcast thinking I've always wondered that.
See, there are no stupid questions.
Exactly. I love it. What about you? What's one that you would add?
I was going to say, I'll bring us home and add my favorite podcast to the list. And I think it was the first podcast I ever even started listening to. And it's called Eventual Millionaire, and Jamie Masters is the host. And she has hosted this podcast for probably 8 or 10 years. She is a business and entrepreneurial coach who I've actually gotten to work with. And what she does is she interviews people who have basically built self-made millionaire status for themselves. Whether that's through creating a product, whether that is, through an entrepreneurial endeavor, whether it's through books or just all kinds of different ideas on how they have gotten to that point. But what I really love about the conversations that she has is they're very there's a lot of practical actionable advice in there. So I've learned about accounting system. Profit First is something I learned about from that podcast that we implemented here, and the Traction Entrepreneurial Operating System of how to, set goals and be productive is something I learned about from that podcast. So there's a lot of really cool kind of business systems and even like tech systems advice in there that could be applicable whether you are operating your own business, or to go back to the employment to entrepreneur episode teaser, go tune into that. Whether you're an entrepreneur, there's a super cool like actionable recommendations there, which is always fun because I like takeaways.
Yeah, takeaways. Takeaways are good.
So, and whether it's making you whether the takeaway is, I never thought about that, i.e. no stupid questions, or it's actually like there's a tool that'll actually make my business more efficient. I feel like there's just podcasts are such an interesting thing. And I think back to like the days of, we sometimes laugh about like when I used to take my good old tape recorder and put it up next to the radio and hit the red button in order to record a song. Like how far have we come to this idea of just being able to tune into perspectives and world news and development ideas and all of that kind of stuff via podcast. It's an awesome resource and one of the reasons that we wanted to ask our guests for good recommendations. So this was a fun add to this season of No More Mondays, and I have a feeling it'll be back. And so there you have it. We are rounding out Spring Shorts with a conversation about the awesome podcast recommendations that we've had over this season of No More Mondays. I hope you will tune in next time for a great episode and more conversation around how you can be an inspired, confident professional and craft the career of your dreams. We'll see you soon on another episode of No More Mondays. Thanks for listening to this episode of No More Mondays. We hoped you grabbed some great insights to help you improve your professional satisfaction. Please visit us at Apple iTunes and give us a rating so we can continue to offer you awesome interviews and content each week. No More Mondays. New episodes drop every Wednesday. No More Mondays is brought to you by Career Benders, Inc. in partnership with executive producer Jane Durkee. For more information about career coaching, resume writing, personal branding, recruiting, and entrepreneurship coaching services, visit our website at careerbenders.com. That's Career Benders, B as in boy, S as in Sam.com. This is your host, Angie Callen, signing off. Until next week when we chat with another inspired, confident professional.